Imagine walking into a luxury car store and being treated as if you weren't worthy of being there just because of your appearance. Now imagine if, years later, that same person returns with something that would make that salesman rethink everything he believes about wealth and status. You won't believe what happens next. She was used to suspicious looks, a black woman in a city where few seemed to believe in her worth beyond appearances. She was always dressed simply, but she carried a confidence in her eyes that was hard to ignore. But what she didn't expect was the reception she would receive when she entered that luxury car store. Little did the sales assistant know that, in just a few minutes, her arrogance and prejudice would turn into one of the most humiliating moments of her career. Before I start this dramatic story, let me know in the comments which region you're watching from, and I'll leave a heart in your comment. Let's get started. She took a deep breath before entering the store, like someone preparing for a silent battle. It had been a long day, and all she wanted was to complete the task her son had entrusted her with. But as she stepped through the shiny glass door of the dealership, she realized that she was about to face a challenge she hadn't imagined she would encounter. The environment was full of sophistication, with polished marble floors and luxurious vehicles arranged strategically, each displayed like an untouchable work of art. The salesman, a tall man with neatly combed hair, looked up when he saw her enter and, at the same moment, his expression changed. He frowned and his eyes showed a silent but incisive appraisal. He studied her, like someone assessing whether or not someone deserves his attention. She felt that judgment and, for a brief moment, almost turned around. She had experienced many similar situations throughout her life, but something in her pushed her to continue. With firm steps, she approached one of the most luxurious models in the store, a car of impeccable design, gleaming under the precise lighting of the showroom. Instead of approaching with professionalism, the salesman walked towards her with an expression bordering on debauchery. He stopped beside her and, in a visibly sarcastic tone, asked, "Are you sure you're in the right place?" It was an almost venomous question, disguised as courtesy. The doubt in his eyes was visible, as if he was waiting for her to reveal the real reason she was there. Perhaps he thought she had the wrong door or was lost. She remained calm. She looked directly at him and replied softly, "I'm here because I have a reason. Now, could you show me this car?" The salesman seemed to hesitate, but his sarcasm didn't disappear. Instead of presenting the car to her politely, he started talking superficially about the cheaper models, gesturing with a certain arrogance, as if trying to convince her that it would be better to look at something more affordable. It was as if he was playing a role, showing his power and putting her in a position of inferiority. With every answer he gave, there was a clear insinuation that she didn't belong in the world of that luxury showroom. Still, she remained steadfast, listening patiently as he made a point of emphasizing the prices, highlighting the figures out loud, as if to reaffirm that she was out of his reach. With each number he pronounced, it was as if he was trying to build a barrier, telling her, without words, that this space was not for someone like her. But what he didn't know was that she had only just begun. This barrier that he was trying to erect with his arrogance and prejudice would not make her back down. She knew that this man had no idea what he was about to face. His condescending tone, his rehearsed gestures, the way he looked away to avoid direct contact with her, all made up a performance that most of them seemed to accept without question. He didn't know that, behind that simple appearance and serene posture, there was a woman who had already faced many barriers. Discrimination, prejudice, and judgments had become old acquaintances throughout her life, and she had learned to face each situation with patience and, above all, with a silent confidence. But at that moment, faced with treatment that bordered on mockery, she felt the need to show him, in a subtle and powerful way, that he was very wrong. She kept her gaze steady, without losing the smile on her face, while he continued his presentation of the car with visible disdain. He was still judging her by her appearance, without bothering to ask more about her intentions. However, she was already planning an answer that would completely change the course of the conversation. Suddenly, while he was still talking, she interrupted him with an unexpected question. "How long does this car take to get from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour?" What about the safety systems? Does it have active stability control and adaptive brakes? The question was direct and to the point, and for the first time the salesperson hesitated. He hadn't expected her to know such specific details. With a slightly surprised expression, he sniffed and tried to answer, but it was clear that he had lost a little confidence. She then took the opportunity to take the next step. With a slight smile, she commented on the latest developments in the car market, mentioning competing makes and models, comparing technical aspects and demonstrating a level of knowledge that the salesman clearly lacked. She watched as his face slowly lost its arrogance and turned into an expression of confusion and even discomfort. He seemed to be searching for answers, but her assurance and the depth of knowledge she was demonstrating were leaving him speechless. She knew she was beginning to change the dynamics of the environment. The sales assistant, now visibly disconcerted, glanced at the other store employees, as if looking for some kind of support or instruction, but no one approached. She was gaining control of the situation, and every word she said reinforced the message that, despite appearances, she knew exactly what she was doing there. Almost imperceptibly, she crossed her arms and waited for him to say something more. The pause lengthened, and the silence was palpable. The salesman tried to maintain his professional posture, but his tone no longer carried the same disdain. Finally, he stammered, Of course, ma'am, let me check a few details about this particular model." When he returned, he no longer looked the same. His posture had changed. The arrogant countenance he had previously displayed had faded into a mixture of nervousness and submission. He held out a card data sheet with slightly trembling hands and tried, without much success, to regain control of the situation. However, before he could even begin to read the details, she held up one of her hands, indicating that he could stop. "I already know the technical data sheet," she said with a sharp calmness. And with a firm tone of voice, she began to recite, from memory, an impressive list of the car's specifications: the engine's power, the average fuel consumption, the latest updates to the interior design, and even details about the personalization she wished to include. With each piece of information she revealed, the salesman's face paled a little more, as if her every word was an uncomfortable revelation that he had profoundly underestimated this customer. Finally, she pulled an envelope from her handbag and placed it gently on the table in front of him. "Here's the entrance fee," she said. The sales assistant, still stunned, looked at the envelope without knowing what to do. "I asked my son to choose the model and specifications for me," she continued, pausing strategically, which seemed to echo in the silence of the store. "I believe he spoke to the manager before my visit. Perhaps you know him." And then, with an almost deafening serenity, she mentioned her son's name. Hearing it, the sales assistant felt the impact of what was happening. That name wasn't just a common name. It was a name that resonated in the industry as that of one of the city's most successful entrepreneurs, a visionary in the technology business and known for his philanthropic work. The salesman went pale, his eyes wide in shock as he finally understood who she was. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Other store employees, who until then had been oblivious to what had happened, began to notice the tense atmosphere and approached discreetly. The sales assistant now looked like a castaway in a storm of his own making. Swallowing dryly, he tried to regain his composure and, almost stammering, said, I had no idea. I'm sorry if at some point," but she interrupted him once again, with the same serene tone of someone who has total control over the situation. "I'm sorry that you thought my appearance would determine how much I'm worth," she said, with a coldness that made the man cringe even more. It was the moment when the whole store seemed to finally understand how profound the error of that judgment was. She continued, "But today, I only came here to make a purchase, not to prove my worth to anyone." The sales assistant, humiliated, just nodded, while the other customers and employees watched the scene. The entire store was now in an awkward silence, almost as if time had stopped. Everyone present had witnessed the lesson that woman had just taught, without raising her voice or showing any sign of resentment. She simply stood her ground, demonstrating a confidence that could not be shaken by labels or superficial judgments. With one last calm look at the salesman, she made it clear that she didn't carry any grudges, but she wouldn't let disrespect go unnoticed either. There was a dignity in her presence that transcended any prejudice he might have harbored against her. She took the contract and, with a simple thank you, turned and walked towards the exit, without looking back. The salesman, still stunned, watched her leave and felt a mixture of shame and regret. He knew that he would never forget that customer, and that, from that moment on, his view of others would never be the same. It was as if that woman, in a few minutes, had undone years of misjudgments he had accumulated. She hadn't just bought him a car, she had left a deep mark that would force him to reflect on his attitudes, his prejudices, and the way he treated people. As she left the store, the other employees looked at each other, whispering impressed. There, in front of everyone, she had proved that appearances never tell the whole story, and that respect is something that transcends social class, color, or expensive clothes. And in the end, it was she who had emerged victorious, not only for having acquired the car of her dreams, but for having shown, without having to put it into words, that someone's true worth is far beyond what the eye can see. She had reminded everyone, especially the salesman, that a person's character is worth more than any luxury label. And as the salesman watched her walk away, he realized that this was a lesson he would carry with him forever. Want to see more inspiring stories like this? Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on future videos. And for those of you who like a good story and watched to the end, leave your comment. I went to the Yendi. Remember, the most valuable lessons come from the most difficult moments. See you in the next video.